What's up, guys? Are you overwatering your plants? Are your plants dying because you're giving them too much water? Are you so afraid to water your plants that you are actually killing them from not watering? Well, check this out. In today's episode, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about overwatering. All the signs, what to look for, what not to look for, what causes it, and how to fix it. So, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so in order to understand overwatering, you need to understand the basics of what actually kills your plants. If you didn't know, the root system of all plants, they breathe in oxygen through the roots. And every time that you water, the water displaces the oxygen away from the root ball, so you are technically drowning your plant. Now, unlike humans, plants can last a very long time without oxygen. But there's going to be a point when it's too long, and then your plant, it's actually going to get overwatered and it's going to die. But it's not going to die from the water. It's not going to even die from root rot. What's actually going to kill your plant is lack of oxygen. So how long does it actually take to overwater your plants? In a container or in the ground? That will greatly depend on the temperatures around your plant. But I can tell you honestly, from growing thousands and thousands of plants over the years, I have never been able to overwater a plant in the ground. You know why? Because in order for you to overwater your plant in the ground, the soil must not drain the water. Meaning that every time that you water, the water will pool. It needs to pool there, and the soil needs to stay wet 24/7. And once those conditions are met, it will take several months to even a year to 2 years to actually kill your plant from overwatering. Overwatering in the ground is very rare. And a lot of people, what they call overwatering are actually other issues, like trunk rot. In containers, overwatering may happen a little sooner. But even then, during their growing season, it is extremely hard to overwater your plants. Right now, my temperatures are over 100 degrees every single day. And I have a lot of my plants on drip irrigation system, automatic irrigation, so they don't have to rely on me to water them. But even those plants stay wet right now, almost 24/7. These plants right here are guava plants, and I have a loquat right here. But these plants are sitting in water, as you can see, because there's no possible way I can water these plants by hand often enough to not kill them. These plants are constantly wet 24/7, but yet they're not being overwatered. How can that be? Most overwatering issues are going to happen usually during the winter time when the temperatures are cooler and indoors. Most of you guys who are actually growing plants will start with indoor plants. You go to the store, you see a nice looking plant, you buy it, you bring it home, and then magically you kill it from overwatering because you kept it wet for a day or 2 days and your plant is dead and magically it got overwatered. Well, I can tell you that is a myth. Overwatering takes a very long time to kill your plant. The signs are there, they are very subtle, and unless you're completely ignoring your plant, you're not paying attention to your plant, most of you are killing your plants from underwatering rather than overwatering. So let's go ahead and talk about what actually kills your plant. As you guys know, the root system of your plant requires oxygen in order to live. So every time you water it, you're actually drowning it. So as long as you let the soil dry somewhat in between watering, off and on every once in a while, your plant's going to be okay. Now the soil needs to stay wet 24/7 for you to be able to overwater your plant. But as you can see, I have a lot of plants right now in flood trays, and they are wet 24/7, but yet they're not being overwatered. Now if these plants stay in this soil 24/7 wet, by this winter, it's still 24/7 wet, then I may start experiencing overwatering issues. So let's go ahead and talk about the early signs of overwatering. A lot of you guys, the first sign you think of overwatering, it's going to be yellowing of the leaves, like this right here. You see these leaves right here are yellow? Well, oh my God, I'm overwatering my plant, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut the water off. And you know what's gonna happen if I do that? This plant will be dead within 24 hours. Because I went online, somebody told me yellow leaves means overwater, so I'm gonna stop watering my plant. And that is 99% of you guys out there. Not every single yellow leaves means overwater. And even if it was due to overwatering, it's still going to take several weeks to several months for your plant to actually die from overwatering. So just because you see one yellow leaf doesn't mean you're killing your plant. If you're seeing yellow leaves in the summer, I can guarantee you it's not because of being overwatered. I can guarantee you it's because you're not watering your plants. If you need to learn more about yellow leaves And the heat, you need to watch my video on the different types of heat damage, which will also cause yellowing of the leaves. Now let's go back to overwatering. So let's say you have a plant that has yellow leaves like this, and you think it's overwatering issues. Well, I can tell you, the yellowing of the leaves due to overwatering is caused by the nutrients in the soil being flushed away constantly from the root system of your plant. Most plants, the main ingredient they need in order to keep the leaves green and nice looking, it's going to be nitrogen. But if the soil is wet constantly and the nutrients are being flushed away from the root ball and your plant's not able to eat because always wet, nutrients being flushed away, well, the first nutrient that your plant is going to be deficient of is going to be nitrogen, and that is called chlorosis, and that will cause yellowing of the leaves. And usually that's going to be caused by overwatering, but it can also in containers be due to you not fertilizing your plants. So it's been a year, 2 years, you're watering your plants, and then all of a sudden you're getting yellow leaves like this right here. It does not automatically mean it's overwatering. It could mean that you need to feed your plant, especially if it's in a container. Now, another thing to keep in mind is yellowing of the leaves in the ground is very rare. I can tell you that because once you actually start watering the soil, living organisms will come in and they will actually feed your plant. And if the plant is deficient in something, it will grow roots and go somewhere else and actually feed its own self. Even here in the desert, my plants do that. In my hard clay soil, that is completely inorganic. It has no organic material in there, but guess what it does have? It has water. Plants in the ground are, like I said, extremely hard to overwater. So yellowing of the leaves for plants in the ground, most times it's going to be caused by underwatering issues. And I have a prime example. I have a video on this plant right here. I think it was last year. I did not water it for an entire month in the summer because I thought the rain we were getting was enough, but it was not enough. So what the tree did, it started cycling its canopy. Most of the canopy turned yellow and the leaves dropped because the tree did not have enough water to sustain that canopy, because I did not water it for an entire month because it rained and I thought the plant had enough water. And my leaves turned yellow because that's what plants do to cycle their canopy, their leaves. They will stop sending nutrients and water to their foliage, and then those leaves will turn yellow, crispy brown, and then they will drop. And the plants do that in order to preserve water. Just because you see yellow leaves does not always mean overwatering. And this one is a prime example. You need to watch that video because this right here, it's not my opinion. I'm not biased. It is reality. You cannot argue with reality. I know a lot of you guys want to know exactly what to look for in overwatering issues. Well, for one, it takes a very long time to overwater your plants. If it's during the summer, it's hot, extremely hard to overwater your plants, even if all the other conditions are met, meaning 24/7 the root ball of your plant is wet. Even if that is met during the summer months, you will not be able to overwater your plants outside. It's just not going to happen. The plants are sweating. They're growing faster than the anaerobic bacteria will be able to kill your plant. So you will not be able to see any issues during the summer months. Now let's talk about the winter. So let's say you have a plant, it's cooler outside or indoors, and then the leaves are turning yellow. The first thing you need to do is you need to check the root ball, okay? If that root ball is soaking wet, and then you see the bottom of your trunk all squishy, maybe it's peeling. You check the root system and you see the roots just being mushy. Like if you had noodles and you left them sitting in water for like a day or two, that's exactly what they're gonna feel like. That's what root rot will look like. If the soil is wet like that, the roots are all mushy, the bottom, the crown, the base of your tree, it's all mushy, maybe turning black, the bark is peeling off, and then you also have yellowing of the leaves. Guess what? That is a sign of overwatering. So what's actually killing your tree? What's killing your tree is the die-off of the root system. The root system supporting this canopy here, when you overwater your plants, it's going to die off. So when the plant has not enough roots to sustain that canopy, remember what I just told you earlier? the first thing your plants are gonna do is they will cycle their canopy. They will thin themselves down because they are trying to preserve water and energy to survive. And that's the first thing plants are gonna do when they are dying from being overwatered. Once again, this is gonna be mainly during the winter months, or for those of you who have houseplants. Before your roots actually start dying off, what you're actually gonna experience when you overwater your plants is going to be trunk rot. So a lot of you guys like to use mulch, and especially indoors, a lot of you guys keep your plants wet. Because remember, plants sweat for the same reasons you do, and over 90% of the water you give your plants, they will use through sweating. So the more your plant sweats, the faster the soil will actually dry out. This is why my plants right now outside, I'm watering up to 4 times a day because it's hot. They're sweating, they're drinking water, the soil is drying faster. Now, this plant right here, I cannot keep it wet. I need to put it in a bigger container, and on top of that, I need to put it on a drip irrigation system because there's no way I can water this by hand. Because if this goes dry 1 hour in the sun, it will die. You see my leaves turn yellow right here? That did not turn yellow from overwatering. It turned yellow because this went dry, just like maybe, I would say 30 minutes or less. And then the plant immediately went into overdrive. I'm gonna save myself mode, and then it started cycling its leaves, and the leaves started turning yellow. I have a video on my guava, the leaves turning yellow as well. I'm not making this up. This is a reality, guys. You need to watch that video. And this plant right here is doing the same thing. It was trying to minimize sweating, transpiration, so it was trying to drop its leaves to preserve water. Now, let's talk about trunk rot. So what causes trunk rot is usually when the soil around the crown of your plant, which is where the trunk meets the soil, stays wet permanently. So what usually happens is, especially for those of you that have mulch, or those of you that are growing succulents or cactus or plants that technically that hold water, unlike other plants, what usually happens is the bark will rot from the water touching it and being wet 24/7. Just like you, when you go in a pool for too long, your skin starts becoming wrinkly, right? Imagine if you stayed underwater for days. What do you think is going to happen to your skin? Well, the same thing is going to happen to the trunk of your trees, and that is called trunk rot. So this will rot right here, and then that will cut off the circulation to the entire canopy of your tree. So trunk rot will actually manifest a lot faster. The signs for trunk rot usually are going to be the soil is going to be wet, maybe you buried the trunk too deep into the soil. So if you're wondering about trunk rot, just look at the base of your tree. It needs to look firm. It needs to look green, healthy. If it's mushy, if it's peeling off, you got trunk rot. So you need to stop watering immediately. You need to put that plant in open air, sun moving air, get a fan going, or even take it outside in the shade. You need to dry it out immediately. Some plants will recover, some plants will not. And what actually it's killing your plant is, even though the root system of your plant's healthy, it's still functional, it hasn't developed root rot. Well, guess what? The plant's not able to send water and energy to the upper canopy because you cut the circulation off, because the cambium layer is right underneath the bark right here, and if you cut that if that rots away, there's no way for your plant to sustain its upper canopy, and then the leaves are going to turn yellow. Usually with trunk rot, the first thing you're going to notice is your leaves are going to wilt, and then you're going to think, oh, I need to water my plant. So you're going to go and water your plant, and then the leaves are not going to perk back up because there's no way for that plant to send that water to the rest of the canopy because you cut off the circulation right here. So the leaves are going to wilt, they're going to turn crispy brown, and then your tree is going to start dying from the top to bottom. The areas farthest away from the root ball will die off first, and then it's going to start coming down. So why does the top die off before the bottom? Because this area right here takes the longest and the most effort to actually send nutrients and water to keep alive. So those areas are going to get cut off first before the lower canopy. And that's why most plants that experience trunk rot or root rot or any other type of physical or chemical damage to the root system will start dying off from the top to bottom. Let's talk about root rot. What is root rot? What causes it? And how does it actually kill your plant? Well, root rot, it's exactly what it sounds sounds like. The root system of your plant is rotting away. Why is it rotting away? Well, it's rotting away because it's being wet 24/7 for a very long time. Root rot is very uncommon, especially if you keep your plants outside. Like I said earlier, it's mainly going to happen in the winter time or if you have plants indoors. But what actually causes root rot? Every time that you water your plant, the water displaces the oxygen away from the root ball. Remember, plants need oxygen in order to survive. If they don't have air, they will die. So what usually happens is there is no oxygen around the root ball when you water the plant because the soil is wet. It's wet 24/7. So then there's a bacteria. It's called anaerobic bacteria. And that's what creates a smell. So if you ever had a plant, you took it out of the container and then you smelled it and it stunk, that is anaerobic bacteria. And the smell is created by that bacteria. But that bacteria can only live in an environment that lacks oxygen. But just because it smells doesn't mean your plant's dying immediately. Anaerobic bacteria can happen as soon as a week. Let's say I keep these plants wet 24/7. If I don't let them dry out at all, within a week or so, the soil may stink a little bit. But is that going to kill my plant? No, it's not going to kill your plant. You know why? Because even though root rot is actually setting in, it's still going to take several months to actually kill the plant. Because remember, this needs to stay wet 24/7. And on top of that, the ambient conditions have to be right in order for your plant to die from being overwatered. So let's say if I keep this plant wet for the next 2-3 weeks, and then the soil starts stinking, what's going to happen? Well, nothing's going to happen because this plant is growing faster than root rot can kill it. And root rot takes a long time to actually rot the root system of your plant. The root system of your plant will not rot immediately. It will not rot overnight. Depending on the plant and how big your plant is, it may take weeks, months, and for bigger plants, even over a year. I've had many plants that have been overwatered in the past, but even then I couldn't kill them. And the only reason I've noticed they were overwatered is because back in the day when I didn't know what I was doing, I was putting little plants in huge containers. And then when I moved those plants again, I've noticed the bottom of those containers stunk because they have been wet 24/7. But even then, my plants did not die. And that's one of the reasons why I recommend people not to put their little plants in huge containers, because the bottom of those containers will never dry because it will take a very long time for your plants to root out those bigger containers. But even then, my plants didn't die. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about how to fix overwatering issues. So let's say you identify a plant that has been overwatered. The soil stinks. Maybe you're experiencing early signs of trunk rot. Maybe you got yellowing of the leaves due to chlorosis. So how do you fix it? Well, the first thing to fix it is to cut the water off. But before you cut the water off, you have to make sure 100% the symptoms you're seeing are not due to being underwater, that they are actually overwatering issues. One of the signs for that is you've had the plant for months, maybe even years. You know exactly what the plant is supposed to look like, and the symptoms you are seeing started happening very slowly. Overwatering issues do not happen overnight. First, you're gonna get the yellow leaves, then you may get the wilting, then you're gonna get the dieback, but the entire process will take weeks to months once you actually start seeing the signs. So it takes a very long time. So if you just bought a plant, you had it for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then, oh my God, you think you're overwatering your plant? I guarantee you, you're not overwatering your plant unless that plant was already being overwatered before you even bought it. The main killer of plants in my area right now are people not watering the plants. I just had a lady come in today and she was wondering if she was overwatering her citrus. So she bought a citrus in a 5-gallon container like this, and then she was watering it twice a week, and she asked me if she was overwatering her tree. Well, I can tell you she was not. She was underwatering it. These trees right here, they're drying out very quickly, and if they don't get watered in one single afternoon, you will lose the entire canopy, and that's exactly what she was experiencing. But she was so afraid to water that tree from all the myths, from everybody else spreading misinformation online, that her tree almost died because she didn't have the right information. So let's say you have a plant that has been overwatered. You know 100% it's overwatering issues. It's been several months, several years. You know 100%, there's no questioning it, right? So how do you fix it? Well, the first thing for you to do is you need to add some heat. Heat will kill anaerobic bacteria. According to Google, 140 degrees or so is what actually it's required to start killing anaerobic bacteria. I understand for those of you outside the desert, it's gonna be very hard for you to achieve those temperatures. For me, not hard. These containers right here get 150, 160 degrees when the sun hits them directly, when my outside temperatures are 100 degrees, 150, 160 degrees. That will kill the bacteria immediately. That's one of the reasons why I don't get overwatering issues here in the desert during the summer. But for those of you who do not live in the desert, what's another way to kill anaerobic bacteria? Well, that is to add oxygen. As soon as the bacteria is exposed to oxygen, it will die off within a couple hours easily. So what you do is you let the soil dry out completely. Understand how to water your plants correctly, and another thing that you can do to help your plant recover, you can prune the canopy back, because even though the plant has its root system intact, well, it's not going to be able to support that canopy anymore because it has died off a little bit. So what you do to preserve energy, just cut the canopy back, I would say around 25%. Let the soil fully dry, but do not stop watering completely. But do let it dry 100% in between watering, and you will be good to go. So my take on this video is, do not be afraid to water your plants, especially during the summer months. It takes a very long time to overwater your plants. The signs are very clear, and the signs are very similar to underwatering issues. But the easiest way to tell if it's an underwater issue or an overwatering issue is two. One, you had the plant for a long time. That plant had to be wet for several weeks, several months, even over a year. And then two, you check the soil and you know the soil is either soaking wet, the trunk is rotting away, or if you check the soil and the soil is dry and your plant is showing overwatering issues, guess what? It's not overwatering issues. Your plant just needs water. Simple as that. But besides letting your plant dry and adding some heat if you're able to, time, that's it. That's all you can do. Just time. You gotta wait. It's going to take easily, depending on the extent of the damage to your plant, it can take 6 months. It can take even over a year for your plant to actually recover. And sometimes when the damage is extreme, your plant may just completely die. But remember, this process takes a long time, and you had to completely ignore your plant for that long for the overwatering to actually kill your plant. Anyways, hopefully this clears out some of the misinformation that you see all over the internet. As always, if you have any questions, don't forget to comment below. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, I will see you next time.